Welcome, Bitcoiners, to maybe our best show ever. Maybe it could be our best show ever. We might be in the end game, maybe with the answers to the confusing, crazy weekend. We got it here. But the most important thing we have to mention before we get started is the sun came up this morning and Bitcoin is still running. Can you imagine all this? And we haven't even noticed. We haven't even noticed. The sun came up just as fine as it ever did. Bitcoin running just as consistently and predictably as it ever did. So let's have a coffee and talk about what's new, right? A lot going on. Good morning, McTimmy. How you doing? Rickster, Swigster. Good morning, my man. Good morning, Bitcoin Graffiti. PV, right? Good morning, PV. Any news? Any news? There's some news. There's some news. Morning, Bitcoiners. Morning, Bud. Morning, Kevin. So, as you know, we like to start every show with the fakest news we can find. Ohio, Kevin. Ohio. Ohio gozaimasu. I got a good one here. I got a good one. Our friend Fauci in the New York Post is quoted as saying, this is good. This is good. So he says, Fauci maintains that the COVID outbreak could be a natural occurrence and that critics suffer from insanity. Insanity. Okay, well, maybe we're insane. We'll see. There's a whole bunch of them out there on Silicon Valley Bank and its woke executives, but we don't need to get into those. Everyone is sort of figuring that out on their own. So, of course, the big news is still the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, now Signature Bank, and Silvergate last week, right? So lots of bank stuff going on. It looks like they made an announcement coming out of the Federal Reserve this weekend. The Federal Reserve Board announced it will make available additional funding to eligible depository institutions to help assure banks have the ability to meet their needs of all depositors. So the mechanism that they created was they can basically print away the bond losses. So what they're going to do is give liquidity against the high quality securities, right? So the bonds that link the banks to the government, right? Those are the high quality ones. Eliminating an institution's need to quickly sell those securities in times of distress. So they started with 25 billion. We'll see if it's enough. And the point is that any depositor who is banking with Silicon Valley or Signature will have their deposits back. Now, what it doesn't do, and this is where some of the politics are already entering, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about some of the political divisions. One of the political things out there that everyone's discussing already this morning is that there's no bailout for stockholders of the banks as there was in the 07, 08. This is focused on the depositors, focused on the people who are using these institutions. So that's why you still see this morning all of these stock plummet, right? There's a crash in stocks around a bunch of American banks and even some European ones. Credit Suisse, I think, is down 60% overnight or something. And you've also got it at Deutsche Bank. Republic Bank in America is First Republic Bank is one of them. You saw folks in the First Republic Bank lining up in California this weekend in the rain. There was sort of a viral video going, seeing someone just driving by in the rain, noticed a bunch of depositors waiting in line to get their money out. So it looks like the depositors are going to be fine for now. A lot of people asking, the actual announcement was the Fed says its new bank term funding program, that's what they call it, the bank term funding program, which offers loans to banks under easier terms, is big enough to cover all U.S. uninsured deposits. And William Middlecoop asks all, that's $19 trillion. So they got 25 billion. So that's, what does that come out to? That's like 0.025% of 1 trillion divided by 19. I don't know. What is that? Like 0.00 something. So we'll see if the 19 trillion ends up getting covered. We'll find out. Now, there's lots of people weighing in saying this is a great thing. David Sachs mentioned the following: the basic formula here is actually correct. No bailout for the Silicon Valley Bank stockholders, so just as I was mentioning, or the bondholders, but we will meet the needs of depositors and prevent contagion. But it all sounds hopeless and vague. Half measures won't stop a banking crisis, is what he says. And he says what Yellen should have said: no bailout for SBV stockholders, bondholders, but deposits are safe not just at SVP, but at all regional banks. You can trust the U.S. banking system. We will backstop it if necessary to prevent contagion. We will defend the U.S. banking system. And so he says this is where we ended up, and he gives the link to the joint statement by the Treasury. Depositors will have access, and he goes on to explain that nothing is borne by the taxpayer. That's one of the big messaging talking points that have come out here. Nothing is borne by the taxpayer. Of course, we know that there are how do you say that? Dilutative? I don't know how to say the word. There's dilution effects, right? Dilutative effects. So it depends on your concept of what inflation is, a hidden tax, and all these things. Doesn't really matter as far as where we're headed today for the show. So I'm not going to spend too much time diagnosing who's paying for it. Dilutive. Yes, thank you, Bitcoin. Dilutive. I was adding a vowel there. I was adding a vowel. But here's my prediction. All right. Here's my prediction. Here's where I think things are headed. Thomas Massey tweeted that he was on a Zoom meeting with the Fed, Treasury, FDIC. If you don't know who Thomas Massey is one of the smartest Republican, sorry, not even Republican, smartest members of Congress, right? There's only a handful. Like one of the sad things if any of you watched what went on the other day with Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi, is that they sent their best. That was their best, right? When you see someone like, take a Lauren Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene or syllable. Yeah, I was missing a syllable in there. Marjorie Taylor Greene or Eric Swalwell, or what's the other one who's Schiff. What's his name? Anyway, Adam Schiff. Yeah, Adam Schiff. These are their best. That's the highest quality. That's why they get to go and lie in public, right? That's why they get to go and they're pushed out in front, because the whip and the person who says, well, they got talent. I've seen that whole thing play out in Canadian politics. It's basically like, who isn't stupid enough that we have to hide from any camera and even speaking at all in public other than at luncheons in their home county? Who is not so stupid that we can push out and they can be recorded, who will do the lying and do the spin and do all those things. But there's really only a handful in the end that are even capable of that, right? So that's one thing you got to remember. And Thomas Massey is a separate entity to all of these. He is an MIT guy. There was a big spread on him in the New York Times just last week. They interviewed Tucker Carlson about him. And I think the quote that they used for the headline was a Tucker Carlson quote that they got from the interview was, "I can't believe this guy isn't more famous," or something like that. If you don't know much about Thomas Massey, know this. He is completely off-grid in a house he built himself with his own bare hands, and does all the things I think Bitcoin homesteaders and Bitcoiners think about a lot, right? So this is where he's coming from. Highly educated and practical. I've seen him break party lines on a number of issues. But here's what he said, and I think it's the most important takeaway, and it's what we're going to talk about today, and it's the point of today's show. So here's what he says. He just got off the phone meeting with the Fed, Treasury, FDIC, House, and Senate. A Democrat senator essentially asked whether there was a program in place to censor information on social media that could lead to a run on the banks. And of course, that is the most important thing, right? Remember, the reason we call this show The Breakup, the whole frame of the show that we are all gathered here to talk about and think about, is that the economy has nothing to do with math. The 25 billion and the 19 trillion and all that I just mentioned is a mirage. It doesn't matter. The economy is actually a psychological engine. It's psychology. There's numbers involved, but the math doesn't matter. It is psychology. And in order for a psychological system to perpetuate, it has to be unified, right? You can't, a person who has schizophrenia can't get on with their life, right? A person who has multiple personalities can't get on with their life. A person whose brain has major issues and depression, whatever you want to say, right? Whatever it is, whatever affliction, whatever psychological mental affliction a person is dealing with is probably the most important obstacle in their life. That is a normal standard operating procedure. And if you go back in time and even remember what Abraham Lincoln diagnosed America with in the lead up to the Civil War, or maybe it was even during the Civil War. No, I think it was in the lead up. It was when he was running for Senate when he made this famous speech. He said, a house divided cannot stand, right? A house divided. And now, the reason he chose the house as an allegory is because most Americans built their own homes at the time. Most Americans got their neighbors, they got together, and you had a barn raising, a house raising. And of course, if it didn't come together when you raised it, it was terrible. It would fall apart, right? You couldn't just build a house without coordination, without some form of synchronicity, without some form of orchestration, right? You can't just everyone go off on their own and then the house comes together. You build that room and you build a roof and you build a floor and we'll put it together. That's not how it works, right? That's not how it works. Of course, things can be compartmentalized and done in pieces, but it all has to come together perfectly so that it's not divided. So he used the analogy of a house. Today's title is a banking system divided, cannot stand. And here's what we're about to enter, right? And this is the most important change that we're about to understand. Everything else in America is heavily politicized, as we've seen. Everything, right? Everything under the sun has become divisive, has become engaged in spin, has become highly charged with political backing and political opportunism and psychological operations being infused and injected into the system consistently, constantly for years now. And that's why we have so much fighting on the internet. That's why Twitter is just a cesspool of people hating on each other and getting angry and all these other things. What Thomas Massey is alluding to here, and we saw it all weekend long, is the intense politicization of the economy. We haven't seen it in such bare terms before, right? We've thought about all these things on the outside. Of course, everything is the economy, and that's where some of this stuff has gone awry, right? That's why we've gotten this far down. We've never actually been on top of the target. We've never been on top of the entire system being based on a banking system that has created these misaligned incentives and all of this perversion and mutation and deformity, right? It is now a deformed system. So in the same way that a house divided cannot stand, a deformed psychological state of a nation, of individuals, and of all of our institutions, the primary one being the banking system, cannot stand. It will fail. There's no way around it. There's no way around it. We talk a lot about Jungian psychology here, your shadow, and reconciling and encountering it, assimilating it, merging with it, right? That's one of our principal theories about why we even do the show the way we do it. That's why we call it the breakup, right? It is about ending relationships, starting new relationships. It has nothing to do with breaking down the news, right? We don't break down the news here. We talk about the psychological state that perpetuates these things. And now it happened all weekend long. Look at the politicization entering the system. Jim Acosta last night, right? Jim Acosta, one of the great hoax makers in America, one of the biggest liars going. And he ran a whole show last night on how, here was the actual headline. Silicon Valley Bank isn't the first time Peter Thiel got his billions out before the bottom collapsed. So right away, everyone knows that Peter Thiel, of course, was a major Trump backer, MAGA to the core, right? So obviously he's targeted here, right? And some people even blaming him for starting the bank run. Some people blaming him. Now, lots of other people are blaming Janet Yellen for their attack on Silvergate, Elizabeth Warren for her attack on Silvergate, right? That's all there. We're going to talk a bit about Nick Carter's article again today, how he predicted a lot of this stuff. But it goes on, right? It's not just that. Joe Weisenthal, the stalwart, um, who I questioned in 2019, right? Joe Weisenthal, the stalwart on Bloomberg, the host of the Odd Lots um, podcast. So I was on his show years ago when he was at Bloomberg. I think I was on his show in 2017, even like a long, long time ago. But in 2019, I invited him to talk about the reverse repo market and all the beginnings of that trouble. He was one of those guys. Oh, you Bitcoin people, it's technical. You don't know. You don't know. This is what big kids do. Come on, don't worry about it, right? So I never said I knew more than him about it. I said I have questions, and my prediction is something's going to happen to make this reverse repo market blend in, right? We're going to have another catastrophe. COVID came months later. I didn't know about COVID anything. I just said there would be a psychological reason to print even more money, and no one's going to ask about the questions and the reverse repo market that was going on in September 2019. No, I got it right. I might have been lucky. I don't know. Maybe I was lucky. The stalwart got it completely wrong, right? He got it wrong. Now, he might have been unlucky, right? It was a kind of, as they say, black swan event, COVID, but it still was in my worldview. It's what I was predicting, right? So I never had to change my worldview. I never had to change my psychological state when COVID came. I said, oh, this is what it is, right? I was anticipating something huge and major that was going to change the world, and it happened. Right? Now, I wish it wasn't a virus being released on people and everybody dying and body bags everywhere. I saw the body bags in New York. I was in New York City. It was terrible. It was terrible. I lived in New York City for the lockdowns, right? Um, and luckily I was in close contact with Balaji Srinivasan from about December of 2019 about COVID. And because he had some role to play in the CoinDesk event, and he was saying, you're not doing an event, it's not happening. And he was telling us already in December 2019, cancel, cancel, cancel. Now, I got COVID in January 2020, knew exactly what it was. My whole family got it. So I started traveling after I had COVID, saying, well, I'm immune, I don't care, right? I'm going to go check out. There was an event in Barcelona that was having to cancel or limit what the scope of the event was. So as the person who was running the CoinDesk event consensus at the time, I said, well, I'll go and have a look and see what's going on. See if this means, see if there's any tips I can follow in order to learn from scaled down events. I still didn't know that there were these public lockdowns coming, right? I was in Barcelona for case one. I might be patient zero, by the way. I should share that with everyone. I was in Barcelona for case one. I go to Paris for case one. Then I fly back to New York for case one. And case one in New York City is actually tracked to my building in Manhattan and where some of the other people at CoinDesk worked in a town in Rye, New York. So just up the East River. So, it was within my worldview. I understood what was going on. I didn't have to make many adjustments. And when I got back to New York, I said, well, this is more or less what I said was coming. I didn't know we'd be all locked down, but here we go. The money printer is a humming. And we ended up in the world that I thought we would end up in. So here's what Joe Weisenthal says, right? Here's what he says. He goes, right now, this story is politically ambiguous. Not obviously a right-left dimension to it, but it'll change fast. Concentration of the banking system is going to be a big culture war thing. Preserving regional/community banks versus woke mega banks. There will be a Tucker Carlson segment about how concentrated banking in Canada is. Of course there will be. I mean, you know how many of us suffered from Canadian banking concentration when the former head of the Canadian bank wrote an op-ed in our major newspaper calling for the weaponization of the bank system against the truckers. Of course it's going to be a political issue. Of course it will be. It has there's no chance it's not. There is zero chance now it's not. Now, people picking up on this too, right? So you get David Sachs picking up. Now, I don't know if you guys know the Signature Bank, which was put into New York receivership this weekend. Does everyone know who really banks at Signature from even before it got involved with crypto people and had a crypto settlement system? Does anyone know? Does anyone know? It was Trump's bank. Signature is Trump's bank. It's the only one who will bank with him in New York. So it was Trump's bank from the start, right? I tried to book the CEO of Signature Bank years ago for an event because he was interested in the space and he was in New York and I met him and this and that. And at the time, it was already like, oh, he's been mentioned with Russia collusion. You can't have him on stage, Russia collusion. In the end, there was only ever one person that I was not allowed to put on stage, and that was Steve Bannon, because of all, he had a bunch of, he keynoted an event at CNBC in the summer of 2018, only talked about Bitcoin, and I said, let's get him. And that was the only one where people were like, they might cancel the whole event, and I just couldn't carry it. In the end, I was able to bring the Signature Bank guy, but he backed out. So it wasn't about us, it was about him. But I will say there was already that politicization that was going on. So this is what David Sachs about it, right? And so Signature Bank and the other one, and this is what he says, right? Because everyone, when it came to Silicon Valley Bank, you had a bunch of conservatives say, fuck the tech people. Oh, who cares? They're woke, right? They're all woke. Who cares? So he's pointing that out here. He says, when do all the angry recriminations start over the bailout of Signature Bank depositors? What's the matter, Twitter mob? Cat got your tongue? The truth of the matter is that if Signature Bank had gone under a day before SVB Bank, Silicon Valley Bank, instead of a day after, everyone would have understood clearly the risk to the banking system. And all of the phony demagogues on both the extreme right and extreme left wouldn't have had a word to say about the bailout, right? So I'm completely in line with what David Sachs is saying here, and completely in line with what Joe Weisenthal was saying. This is now entering a completely political cycle, which I'm going to argue is probably the best thing for us. And I'll explain in a second, right? I will continue to explain. So now let's go to the board for a minute, right? And I'll try to put this into how I see what's going on, right? So again, we talk about the economy here as a psychological engine, right? As a psychological engine. So what this ends up making clear is the following, right? You've got our human brain here. Now, first of all, let's start at the top, right, with the communications apparatus. So already we're starting to see messaging around this, right? People are fighting on Twitter about who should get bailed out and what's a bailout and where is this going, and now it's going to be political. But remember, just last week we were talking all about how censorship was used in the January 6th thing, how media messaging, narrative control was huge in the QAnon shaman case, right? So this thing is as broken as you can imagine already, right? We've already divided communications into tribes. If it is, again, a house divided cannot stand, the messaging house has been divided a long time ago. Everybody's been fighting. There is no solution coming from the system. It's not like we're all going to go and watch the Oscars replay from last night if you're against Hollywood wokeism or corporate wokeism or narrative control, right? Most people on that side have already said, get out of here. We don't care about any of this stuff. So right from there, this messaging thing has basically zero credibility now. We've seen the lies. We've seen the narrative control. We were just talking about Fauci, right? He actually went and people are going to carry water for him, right? He's going to say, oh, these people are insane, right? They're insane who question me. When is it insane to question him? Of course not, right? But people will do the work. They will actually carry water for him. So it's going to just increase the division around that question. It's just going to increase the amount of psyops that have to go on around that question. It isn't going to end, right? Now move around, right? Move around to here. Right? So this is what this is an arrow. It's broken, and you've got the follow the money tension. And follow the money tension is about the messaging that comes out of every political party here. So this one here is already completely warped, right? But what does it mean? So all this talk about China this weekend, war, what's going on with America. China last week coming out straight up saying a war and conflict with America may be inevitable now because of the hawkish nature of American talking points around all this stuff. It looks like there's people priming the engine for this conflict. And my question, though, is, and Cernovich brought it up here, right? Cernovich has been talking about this for days. Let me find it. I'll get back to that one. So you even get the Atlantic, right? Here's this could have been fake news of the day. So think about this war machine and the narrative that connects it, right? This is an actual headline from the Atlantic this weekend. This is what they say. The arsenal of democracy is reopening for business, but after decades of decay, will it happen quickly enough to save Ukraine? They're talking about American military spending, its efficiency and all that stuff. And they're just saying it is, of course, reopening for business. But how connected is this thing anymore? Are they actually going to get the patriot Americans who would otherwise sign up for conscription, who would sign up to go to a foreign war? Is it going to convert? After the Jacob Chansley thing and the QAnon shaman and all the messaging around January 6th and all the political fighting, it ain't going to happen. That dog ain't going to hunt, right? You might get some people, some urban people who are still within the democratic liberal capture media machine that may be convinced to go over there, but we're not sending our best. We're not sending our best, right? We're not sending our best. The fit, militant, all those people, they're turned off by all of it. They're turned off by all of it. You're not going to be able to get patriotic Americans to sign up for anything. You can draft them. They're going to be draft dodgers at a scale we've never seen before, right? If you thought there were a lot of draft dodgers back in the Vietnam days, you ain't seen nothing. They ain't coming. There's no way Americans are fighting. Just no way. That's what I believe. I could be wrong, right? I could be wrong. So this connection here is psychologically done, right? The next one, these institutions, banks, governments, right? Um, here's what here's a great quote from, and this is even just going back into the tension around it, right? So this is Joel Pollack from Breitbart. He says, "I'm floored by how little sympathy conservatives generally have for employees in Silicon Valley, most of whom have nothing to do with SVP and some of whom are not woke. This is a soft form of civil war, or maybe a prelude to it. We no longer care about each other's suffering." But here's what Jeffrey Miller said to it, right? A crypto sort of Bitcoiner adjacent guy. He goes, "I'm a centrist rather than a conservative, but I think a lot of the backlash is driven by tech bros. One, colluding with government to censor citizens. Two, cynically promoting wokeness. Three, recklessly developing AI systems, blah, 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 blah." So again, how much credibility do any of these political institutions have? Janet Yellen can go cry and yell all around the world. No one's going to follow her, right? No one thinks that she's going to offer anything in terms of leadership and solutions. Watching Joe Biden, he's going to give an address today. Watching him have to put words out of his mouth continues to be one of the funniest things in the world. Now, what they're asking for, and remember, as a Bitcoiner, I embraced Trump as president because I knew he was going to change reality. And I embraced him the minute I heard him speak in 2015. I said, this is what we need as Bitcoiners. This is it. We don't need him for his policies. We don't need him for anything like that. God knows we don't need him for his ideas about Bitcoin. What we need for him to do is to change how we think of the presidency, change how we think of governments, change how we think of nations, the whole institution, right? I welcomed the idea of a television star taking over the government. We'd already had a more or less actor for 8 years now, a very smart one, Obama, right? One of the top IQs of any president we've had. Very the way he was able to use the English language in his own way was super high level, right? Super persuasive. There were times where he was as persuasive, even with the teleprompters, as Trump. Remember what Trump's, Trump with all his nicknames, right? One of the best ones he ever had. And this was candidate Trump when he was really barnstorming and rock and roll in 2016. He used to call, the Hillary Clinton one is an all-time classic. He got it reduced where he could have just said, "Hey, that old crooked," and that was enough to know who he was talking about. Imagine he could say crooked, and you would fill in the blanks and say crooked Hillary, and that was high level persuasion. But the best one he ever had, I thought, and it never really caught on, was his one for Obama. He used to call him teleprompter guy. Oh, we're done with teleprompter guy. So powerful, so powerful. So, the idea that answers are going to come from political institutions, from any of these institutions that we've had before, is now completely lost. And remember, just as I was saying, Trump as president in 2015, I embraced it because of its potential to change reality, just flip reality upside down. And in the same way that once I understood Biden was going to get it, I said, well, this is great. Like everything's good for Bitcoin. Who would you rather in the fight that we're in now, banking system divided? Do you think Joe Biden can save this thing? I mean, he's got zero credibility. No one is following this guy. I've never met a Biden fan in my life, honestly. I met enough people who hated Trump to believe that Biden could have gotten 80 whatever million votes. Like that is a plausible thing to me. I can't say otherwise. That's plausible. But I never met a single fan in my life. There's no such thing, right? There's no such thing as a person who's just like, oh, Joe Biden is great, right? There's no such thing. There's people who don't hate him. There's people who say, oh, what ice cream did he have? And they like, they follow the times of his life. But we're talking about a banking system divided here that's already charged politically. He has zero persuasive ability. He's the least persuasive person who's ever held the role. There's no one less persuasive than him. And I've always thought it was a beautiful punishment, a beautiful, almost, you can see the hand of God in it. It's so gorgeous. Watching this doddering, broken dementia brain trying to tackle the most complicated time we've ever been in. Think of the engineering that would have to go in, financial engineering to go in to tackle this problem. He could not buy ice cream at one of those shops. He's not capable of even making change, right? This is a very, very low IQ, low brain power individual, even from the start. Even from the start, this was not sending their best. This is not the best guy. So right away, you see again another break, right? And now the biggest story that no one's talking about right now, right? So political institutions ain't going to do it. We ain't going to war. This thing's broken here. And where do we head, right? This last one. The actual essence of the US financial system was built from the petrodollar. It was built from the no options monopoly that was created on energy markets and dollars, which led to innovators' dilemma in energy. It led to all kinds of wars, all kinds of US misadventures around the world. And what in the end happened this week is that China brokered a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. There's a new Iran deal now. It ain't the Iran deal that America signed. It ain't the Iran deal that Obama signed. It ain't pallets of cash. It's none of those things, right? It's none of those things. It is simply those two countries using China as a peacemaker, brokering a deal and ending probably the Yemeni war, if we're lucky, right? If we're lucky, the Yemeni war will end. But the most important part is that the petrodollar is now no longer supported by Saudi Arabia, which was vital. And we already saw that. We've already seen Saudi hint, we'll sell it for Chinese yuan, we'll sell it for Russian money, we'll sell it for other things. But that's gone. The petrodollar's over, guys. It's done. There's no more. We abandoned it. We, in our arrogance and our hubris as North Americans, as Americans, believed that everyone would just follow us and that none of this stuff would happen. This is what institutional rot looks like. This is what a broken psychological state looks like. You think that you can count on things you counted on before, but you can't. So now what do we have here? Again, it's a psychological engine, right? We talk about the perpetuation of ideas, things moving forward, one step after the other. That's what's required to get your consciousness intact, right? You've got to be able to put one step forward, go through the day, and not collapse at every little event. Every piece that has perpetuated the world before is now geared and primed for more conflict, more tension internally, not externally, internally. If you follow the money, right? If you follow the money between communications and war, that's completely divided. If you follow the money between the war machine and institutions, it's completely divided. If you follow the money between the political institutions and oil now, it is completely divided. Whatever you throw at this system, whatever you throw at the banking system, it is divided politically. And we haven't seen that before. We haven't seen mass political division directed at the economy and at the banking sector before. Are people going to come together? Are they going to hold hands and save banks? No, 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 no. This can go one way, like Occupy, right? It can go like it did in 2011. It can go another way, where the federal government becomes the bank of all of these depositors, essentially bringing in a CDI, a CBDC, which I predicted 3 days ago, right? When this whole thing started, I said, this looks like a CBDC. This looks like the prelude to a CBDC. And that could be it, right? So you could get mass protests at a grassroots level. You could get some form of capture and nationalization of the banking system. That's what Balaji calls it. Balaji calls it the nationalization of the banking sector. Here's what he said. Balaji says, let me get the pieces here. Well, here's William Middlecoop saying the same thing. CNBC understands it. They just asked former Fed President Fisher, isn't this a nationalization of the US banking system? Fisher is the former president and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, having served in the post April 2005 to 2015. And he does say yes, right? That's what it looks like. The Federal Reserve, even go back to these institutions, right? The Federal Reserve has admitted tacitly that they caused this. Right? They caused it with their messaging around bonds and buying bonds and the risk, and then not jacking rates and then jacking rates, right? That's what caught everyone in this system. So this is what Balaji says. He says, yes, it's true. We're now in the Fed-Dick regime, where the Fed will print to backstop banks. But who knows what happens going forward? If they're actually saying you have principal risk, well, shouldn't you have principal control? And that means self-custody, right? So he says, it's like San Francisco. It's a failed state. You pay for the police, but they don't prevent crime. You also need private security. Similarly, you pay for the banking regulations, but you don't have private insurance on top of that, because your business account can vanish overnight. So it is a lot like it, right? The Sirius report saying here, the recent actions of the Fed and other agencies have effectively turned what little credibility there was left in the US financial system into it now being the laughing stock of the world. There will be profound consequences for such actions, right? Indeed, bringing the circus show of Trump and Biden and the politics and Hunter Biden and January 6th and QAnon shaman and injecting that drama and theater into our banking system is the chef's kiss for Bitcoiners. It's the system self-immolating. This is what burning yourself alive looks like. And that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing, right? And how do they get out of this? Well, I don't see any way. I mean, is Janet Yellen going to convince the world, and is she going to go to Iran and Saudi and be like, hey guys, come on my team, we're going to fix this? Is she going to go to China? Is Biden going to go to China? Who is coming to save anyone? No one. No one is coming to save anyone. There's no way. There's no way. The game's over. The game is over. And now look at the contrast, right? Look at the contrast of the psychological engine of perpetuating ideas forward, of momentum, and the ability to project a better future, right? First of all, we're not dealing with any of this bullshit, right? We're already living in the I'm not the boss of you and you're not the boss of me world. We're already there, right? We already understand that freedom doesn't come from the proper coordination of these institutions, right? Look what it does. Look what the coordination of these institutions do. They divide your own human brain. They cause a form of schizophrenia, right? They cause a form of the same form of dementia that Biden lives with is being projected outward onto normal people, right? So what we've got here already with Noster, right, you don't even need the tech really, right? We understand individually that the principles of forming your own worldview, of adjusting your worldview, but not having one projected into your brain and hijacking your thoughts is probably the best idea, right? So we're already there. We've already organized our worldview with something other than these institutions. So it's important now that the protocols exist for us to be able to leverage that and talk that way. But that's just one thing, right? Now, this war thing, look what we got. It's not just the memes. The idea, just picture Janet Yellen, right, trying to muster an army. It's hilarious, right? Picture people going to fight for Joe Biden and his criminal son, Hunter. It's never going to happen. It's not possible. No one is going to lay down their life for these morons. No one is going to go storm any beach. And watching people get surprised when no one comes to support them, help them, or anything like that, is going to continue to provide laughs for us, right? It's going to continue to provide laughs. Now, I don't want to laugh at people's misery. I don't want to laugh at bank runs. I don't want to laugh at the stress. But there's, a part of this that you can say, I told you so. You can say, well, right, you put any degree of faith into these institutions and you're going to suffer from it. Because again, right, a banking system divided politically is not going to make it. It's not going to make it. There is no resolution because of the saturated nature, because of how politics have saturated the brains of 99% of Americans now. Wow, that's too much. How politics have saturated the brains of a certain percentage of Americans is not going away until they abandon these things, until they break up with all of these institutions that would keep them in this cage, right? A psychological cage. So from there, right, we can start adjusting our ideas, right? We get everything to do with laughter and communicating, and the amount of memes that are going to come out of this, right? The amount of memes that are going to come out of it, and even not just the memes. Take a guy like Nick Carter, right? Nick Carter, who predicted this demolition, right? He called it a controlled demolition, a Operation Choke Point 2.0, just weeks ago. He's the one who predicted that it would be the crypto adjacent banks that ran the on rails and off ramps, on ramps and off ramps between crypto and the U.S. banking system. He warned already weeks ago, and this is what he says, right? He wrote an article in Mike Solana's Pirate Wires about this, and he says, when I warned about Choke Point a month ago, I didn't think in a million years that they would go 100x further and actually take down the top 3 crypto-facing banks. It's breathtaking, and this wasn't an accident. It was a demolition, right? So now, politically, they're coming after us. They've always been there, but they're coming after us, right? Now, what's the difference that we have with them? We're not divided. We're not. We have a consistent worldview. As I said, I didn't have to alter my worldview for Joe Weisenthal's sake about his arguments around the repo market. Things are on schedule, right? And in the same way, Nick Carter predicted this. Things are on schedule. Things are on schedule. And where it leads in the end is towards this thing crashing entirely. It cannot perpetuate further. There's no juice that you can squeeze out of this lemon anymore. It's done. Right? But here we get years now of Bitcoiners laughing, talking, building, and look at our, here's a comment from Daniel Renault, who says, only 25% of military age men are fit for service anyway. It's probably, if you took the fitness of most Bitcoiners, it's probably in the 80s or 90s, right? Not a lot of unhealthy people in the Bitcoin space, just because we're already thinking about industrialization of food and what you should eat and how you should treat your body and working out. The bro science has been there for a long time. I mean, even personally, I changed some of my physical fitness habits because of the Bitcoin community. I was a big runner before. I was one of these crazy runner people. Oh, I got another injury. Oh, I can't run a marathon this year. Oh, my goodness. I got to rehab my leg and blah, blah, more cardio, right? I did some weights, but I didn't have it calibrated right now that I learned from all this bro science. I understand the benefits of lifting heavy and all those things and then there's been years of that now, so I have the advantage already physically of having been part of a community that helped me learn more about physical fitness than I ever knew ever, right? So the mental preparation that's already gone into this moment has taken years for many people. but it can be shared easily, right? We don't suffer from the same broken brains. We suffer from a generosity of spirit. We benefit from a generosity of spirit. We benefit from a more accurate take on health, on physical fitness, on diet, on all the things that go into that, right? And this is how big changes happen. This is how we change the time preference window to get away from this instant gratification. I continue to believe that it is the dopamine dealers that are the final boss. We keep saying, "Oh, it's the government, it's the banks." Wrong, wrong. It's the idea that dopamine and enragement engagement can perpetuate a system. It can't. It just turns it into the system divided, right? And now, luckily for us, all this division is seeping into banking systems, which is the best case scenario, right? Which is the best case scenario. Finally, people's individual health and all of these things is going to be directed towards a decentralized energy system. It's going to be directed towards America, because you can now see, it. It is in front of us. Systemic collapse, right? We can see people like Thomas Massey and everyone who's been thinking about knowing your neighbor who's a farmer and getting off grid and getting your own energy sources and decentralizing everything, right? That's where we're at. That is where we're at. The entire thrust of this is going to push us into conversations around decentralization, limitation of power, and really the controlled demolition of this system. In the same way that Nick Carter predicted a controlled demolition of the crypto adjacent banks, we can see the Newtonian physics of this. This is action reaction, right? This is going to be action reaction. We are going to take this thing down piece by piece quickly. This ain't going to take a long time. We gather here. I am not on a 50-year Bitcoin takes over plan. I am on a 1 to 4 year Bitcoin takes over plan, right? Now, I don't mean everyone's got Bitcoin in their pocket and you're buying coffee with Bitcoin everywhere and all that stuff. We're not scaling transactions to such an extent that everything is being bought with Bitcoin. It's not that. It's solving the banking system. It's solving how we save money, how we're rewarded for saving money. And eventually, the first pillar to fall is going to be the pricing of energy in an asset that is more politically attuned to the actual resource and the commodity, which is energy. And no one is going to, after the banking system becomes politicized, as it will be, no one in the world is going to want that shit. Right now, even now, I go to other countries, and no one in these other countries are divided like Americans. This is because the psyops that America projected to win wars abroad and control the world, to maintain control of the petrodollar, have turned inwards, just like the color revolutions that we exported to Ukraine have turned inwards. And we did it to ourselves, right? The color revolution formula is create an election with no credibility and then back one side by creating a false moral high ground. We're here to defend democracy and you stole democracy and the election is bullshit and blah, blah, blah. So we wrote the book on this thing and now it has come to us. In the same way that we projected economic instability abroad, it's come to us. No one in the world is sitting around waiting for America to get its fucking house in order to go forward and electrify their houses. No one in India is sitting there saying, oh, well, if the American banking sector gets settled, I can start buying my oil with dollars again because I want to promote the rules-based system. No one has any credibility in America. America's lost all of its credibility, all of it. Now, it can get it back quickly. We know the American spirit is there, but it's not going to be for the nation. It's going to be for Americans who push through and redefine how the world works. So this fight is ours, right? The making of Bitcoin into the global reserve currency, into the economic standard of the world, will be driven by many Americans who want to get rid of this psychological abuse, right? Who want to just break up with that system and move to something new. So we're at the front line of World War III in America. The front line of World War III in America is in the front line of World War III is in America. It's Americans who are fighting it. Now they can go abroad. There's other people in the world involved, of course. I don't mean to say that it's not happening everywhere, and other systems not responding to American hegemony is a big part of why I think the good guys are going to win in the end. Right? The good guys always win. Don't forget. Right? If the simulation, as we've decided many times on this show, does favor the most entertaining outcome, we got it here, right? We got it. We got a lot of laughs coming. We got better energy coming. And the principles of I'm not the boss of you and you're not the boss of me are going to be the net result of this, as well as a better time preference and an actual appetite for quality things and not the instant hit of dopamine delivery constantly. So we're there, guys. We're in the end game. It's almost done. That's what I see. Robert, waiting for the adults to step into this mess. There's no more adults. They're all gone. There's no adults. No adults. Sorry. They don't have them anymore. They're gone. He was a punchline on Parks and Rec. Yeah, and you know, going back to this no adults thing. Look, you know, here's a personal feeling that I've had that I can share with you on this. You know, my dad, for example, you know, typical boomer, right? Has nothing but respect for my career, success, whatever you want to call it, right? But I remember even a year ago, he was like, you got to sell. It's going to go down. Mick, what are you doing? Sell, right? And I'm like, Dad, you don't understand. Like, sell into what? All these people you think are, you know, you can't fight the system to this extent, right? Well, the system has fought itself. I don't have to do anything. We're left with Janet Yellen and Joe Biden. The IQ is not there. These are not people you need to listen to. I made a mental leap during COVID where I said, I am not bound by any of their dictates. I broke every rule during COVID. I did nothing. I just lied and scammed the system constantly, right? Because I said the moral authority's gone. What do I have to listen to these people for? They're done. And I made the break right there that I would not participate in any of this stuff. I didn't owe anyone anything. And I proceeded with that idea going forward. And that's where we're all going to arrive. We don't owe anyone anything about this stuff, right? We don't owe America anything. We don't owe the institutions anything. We don't owe the politicians anything. We owe them nothing. We don't owe the banks anything, right? Now imagine we don't owe the banks anything. Think about that for a second. Who's going to pay for their stuff? You're going to see scofflawing of mortgages, scofflawing of all kinds of stuff, right? These guys are zombies, and it ain't going to get better. And anyone who keeps looking for someone to clean it up, that ain't going to happen. They're not capable, right? As banks fail, yes, this is true. This is what I predict too. As banks fail, CBDC will present as a fix, and people will think it's a good idea. Some will, some won't. This is heavily politicized. You're going to see the Tucker Carlsons. You're going to see the PSYOP machine on every side fight in every way. The answer is not more of the same. You can't heal the mind with the mind. You can't. It's not going to work, right? This is shitty psychotherapy. CBDCs, and it ain't gonna help. It'll be cognitive closure for some, but that's fine, right? Jose says Bitcoiners will rebuild the world from the ashes of the clown world. Yeah, absolutely. That's where we're at. Hyper Bitcoinization is more fun than hyperinflation, is what I say. Only 20. Yeah, we got that one. Yeah, probably even fewer amongst the woke. That's what I mean. Yeah, not probably. I'd say 100%. I mean, just a straw poll looking online. That's what I see. Decentralization of value and information allows individuality to ascend. Precisely. Yeah. That's what I see. Collaboration versus conflict. Yeah. And that's, you're going to see it in the corporate model. You're going to see it everywhere, right? Amen. Yeah. Let's see what Bitcoin graffiti. I'm looking forward to this one. The current societal setup is like a part of a bad part of the brain that wants to die off. And it struggles really badly before it reorganizes into a more efficient setup. Yes. This is the always darkest before dawn type of thing, is even microcosmically in your body, right? This is the mythological overlap in the story. Why can't I read today? What the fuck's going on? With government stepping in, having to back depositors will make normies think CBDC is the way to go. Yeah, but the normie population is shrinking every day. That's the good news, right? That's the good news. That's the good news, right? Sell into what is appropriate? Family and Core is asking me, what would you buy besides Bitcoin? Yeah, I don't know. Energy, maybe. I'd buy energy. I would look for energy systems that are more decentralized. That's about all I would be interested in, and it doesn't mean a stock even necessarily. It could just be startups. Don't know. All right, team. I hope that was better than the doom scroll stuff out there, and I hope we can see now that all the fighting that you're going to see around this over the next couple of days and weeks and all that is actually good. It's actually good for us. So let them fight. Let them fight is what I say. All right, team. Peace. See you later. Thanks, Dex. Dex says great show. Thanks, my man. Peace.